Nigel, how did you find carnivore?
Um, a lot longish story, but it starts off, I guess, with a YouTube channel called Auditing Britain, which is one of these channels where a person tries to hold police officers and council workers to account. And this guy, as a matter of fact, was just saying that he'd lost a lot of weight by following the advice of this guy called Eddie Abu, who was a UK bodybuilder, quite a successful one. And I watched his videos, and he basically started talking about insulin as a fat storage hormone. He then talked about stuff that I should have remembered from A level biology at school, which is that carbohydrates are metabolized in the body and they're converted into sugar. So when you eat carbohydrates, you're just eating sugar. And that's when the light bulb moment came on. Um, before that, I'd had a sort of a slow weight gain over a few years, especially during the criminal lockups, let's call them. Like many people, I'd put on a bit of weight, and I got to 100 kg. I wasn't happy about it. Yeah, and no matter what I tried the old things that had always worked, and they weren't working anymore. I think because I was becoming insulin resistant, if I'm being honest. Um, and it wasn't good. I was becoming worried about my health. I'd retired, and I didn't want to go down that route of what I call the techno fix, where you outsource your health to the pharmaceutical mob. Um, so I'm a Christian, and so I prayed to God to try and help me. And very quickly afterwards, Eddie Abu popped up, and I like him because he's very accessible in terms of explaining the key nuts and bolts of why carnivore or low carb actually works. So that's how I found it, Dave, and I've been doing it now for over 18 months.
And we spoke before we started recording,
Yeah,
and just in the last 12 months, I mean, you've dropped a lot overall, but just in the last 12 months, you've dropped a lot, right?
yeah. Um, so over the first, what would we say, first 6 months, 7 months, uh, 10 kg was lost. I think a lot of that was actually water weight. And then what's been happening since then is that I've lost another 8.5, 9 kilos, and that's been pure fat. Um, and I know that from just looking at my body shape. My body shape's changed. I do some, calisthenics at home. A fancy word for like press ups and dumbbell exercises and stuff like that. And what I'm noticing is that over the last year, I've been swapping fat for muscle. And I think that's a key thing with what carnivore actually does, particularly I think for blokes, is that it stokes up the testosterone. And I think it kind of encourages you to build muscle. And I say that as a 60-year-old bloke. I think for me personally, and from all the interviews I've watched you doing with other people, it's transformative. It changes your life. And once
Yeah,
you've done it and seen the results, you don't want to go back.
that's right. And like the thing about the testosterone as well, like you suddenly want to start doing these things. You suddenly
Correct.
have this energy to do stuff, right?
Yeah, correct. And then, of course, the other thing as well is it's an anti-inflammatory way of eating. So I used to have major problems with my left knee from playing football. To the point where it would hurt sometimes walking. Now, the time we're making is got no pain there whatsoever. I had a massive problem with the shoulder rotation cuff injury. Um, that limited the mobility. Get the words out. Mobility of my shoulder, but that's basically again all gone. 100% perfect movement in it.
Wow. And all this just because you were looking on a unrelated website, unrelated YouTube videos.
Yeah, yeah. And it was kind of
That's awesome.
watching this Audit in Britain channel then led me to Eddie Abu, and then from Eddie Abu, then you go to Dave Mack, low carb, zero carb. You go to Anthony Chafee, you go to all the others that everybody else mentions, and then it's just the weight of evidence. And I think that's for somebody who's logical and rational. If you can see thousands of interviews with people, thousands of personal testimonies of people that have adopted this way of eating and haven't died from scurvy and seem to have loads of energy by not eating carbohydrates and sugars and processed junk that masquerades as food, which really isn't, then it becomes, well, I don't know, you'd have to be pretty stupid not to, you know, it's there staring people in the face. And then I guess the other thing was, what happened in 2020. If you still trust the medical establishment and the pharmaceutical cartels, then I don't know, what can you say? It's just staring us in the face.
I think one of the biggest things around that time, and I'm pretty sure a lot of carnivores came out of that, is like that suddenly you weren't allowed to ask questions about anything. And
Yeah,
I think that made a lot of people feel like, okay, so what else am I not allowed to ask questions about?
yeah. Well, to be honest, Dave, because I was living in Slavelandia, otherwise known as Great Britain, in 2020. Um, that was already the case back then. Brexit was a big one. There was massive psychological operations that were going on well before the People's Pantomime of 2020, which people just weren't allowed to talk about. Words had become like criminalized. Hurty words were as severe as being punched in the face. And you weren't allowed to say anything that was against the narrative. So this has been going on for a long, long time in countries like Britain that do not have free speech and haven't had free speech for a very, very long time. Because free speech is basically being able to express any idea without being censored. And then people coming along and saying, "Oh, you can't say that because I'm offended by it," or it's dangerous misinformation. Um, that's the kind of stunts that they played in National Socialist Germany and in USSR. It's the same stuff.
Yeah, I think my least favorite word that came out of that time period was misinformation, because
Yeah.
that's just become a word that people use to say, I don't like what you're saying, so stop talking.
Yeah, no, that's it. Or you will not say that, or we'll throw you in a set. We'll throw you in a cell if you say that. Your talk could cost lives. That's
Right.
and that's no exaggeration. That stuff has been going on for a very, very long time. Especially for me, it used to be a teacher. You had to watch what you said. Now, I used to get into a lot of trouble because although I tried, sometimes I couldn't help but tell the truth, and that would trigger people. Or people would say, they would just get angry because it was going against one of their sacred cows, especially the NHS.
Mm. No, it's a little bit scary in education where you got to be scared to say things or ask questions and stuff, you know?
That's it. It's well, you're living in a totalitarian country at that point.
Yeah.
That's
So
the
where
truth
are
of
you
it.
living now?
I'm living in Finland, and it's a lot better here. There is freedom of speech here, and people are. I was born in 1965, so growing up, I remembered free speech in Britain, and I remembered this thing called eccentricity, that Brits were allowed to be eccentric. But I would say over the last 25 years, that's gone, and what we've got instead is just bland conformity. Everyone's supposed to just parrot whatever the BBC says, whatever the kind of woke consensus is on whatever topic. And if you're away, that Overton window of respectability has been just getting narrower, narrower, and narrower. And it's coming. I think we're going to get more pushback on diet because this is extremely dangerous. Um, Not for us, but for them. You know, if you're the government, do you actually want pensioners living long and healthy lives, collecting their pensions for decades longer than they're currently collecting? Do you actually want pensioners who haven't outsourced their health to their GP, who really are just middle class drug pushers? You know, that's a lot of money. They don't want people switching to a healthy way of living where they're not dependent on the pharmaceutical industry and where they're living into their 90s or beyond even. They don't want that.
Yeah, no, there's not really many people that benefit from you being healthy, right?
No, exactly. They and again, people say, "Oh, that's just the conspiracy theory." But look, it's a lot of money. The government is quite open about the fact that they're worried about an aging population and the amount that they're spending on pensions.
You mentioned conspiracy theory. That's one of those other things that's a bit of
Yeah,
a trigger word for me
yeah,
because I feel like, you know, it's not a conspiracy theory if you're just pointing out basically the way something works. Like,
yeah,
if you're looking at businesses and you say, "Well, they're working that way to be the most profitable."
yeah.
No one calls that a conspiracy theory, right? But
No.
when you put that in terms of governments or big pharma or healthcare, and you say the same thing, suddenly you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, or another one, Dave, as well. I actually had an interaction with somebody, I think, this week on Facebook, and I was like, so it was about cash, using cash. Personally, I think we should just keep on using cash because what they want is to move to central bank digital currencies that are linked to Chinese style social credit scores, which, they could do that to control what we buy food wise, to limit our consumption of meat, like digitally rationing it. But obviously they need the digital ID first, and then they need to get rid of cash. Hence, my opinion that I was expressing, which is we must keep on using cash. And this person just wrote back, "Oh, that's just a conspiracy theory, ha ha ha." I said to, like, this isn't theoretical. They actually have a programmable central bank digital currency in China, and they actually have a social credit score system. There's nothing theoretical about it. It's actually a fact.
Yeah, I had a credit card here. I got a statement from a credit card here that was telling me they were gonna start showing me how many carbon, like my carbon footprint for what everything I'd used, and I was just like, or everything I bought, sorry. And I was just like, this is getting a little bit scary because they're
Yeah.
gonna track this, and then suddenly what's gonna happen? You're gonna get taxed on it or something.
No,
It's
I think they'll just say at the checkout, Dave, they'll just say, sorry, comrade, you can't buy this minced beef. You've already had your ration this month. Because that's what a programmable central bank digital currency would do. It would track and trace every single cent or pound or euro of your spending. And if you're buying too much petrol, or you've gone on too many foreign holidays, or you've bought too many eggs, or in emergency, they might say, "Well, look, comrades, you're only allowed 1 kilogram of beef every 2 weeks, or sorry, 2 months rather." They can just they've got ultimate power, and they would want that power. And this is what they've got in China already, and they're already telling us that we shouldn't be, eating beef or whatever because of cow farts and global climate boiling change. It,
yeah. So, what's it like being a carnivore in Finland? Like, is it easy enough to get beef and stuff?
right, good question. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Pork is unbelievably cheap. It's like €10 a kilo. And okay, pork's not as good as beef, but it's a lot better than peasant carbs. Um, Beef is about, again, it's not too expensive. It's about €12 a kilo, so a little bit more expensive if you want what we call minced meat or ground beef. I've actually got an interesting story about this, Dave. It's been in the newspapers in Finland that there's been a big increase in demand for minced meat, particularly minced beef. And so for me, that tells me the population of Finland isn't growing. That tells me that people are buying more beef. That tells me, and I notice this on things like Facebook and Finnish social media, that the carnivore, low carb, it's growing in popularity. And also, what was interesting was what the stores had said, which gives me a bit of hope. They said, well, higher prices will be a good thing in the long run because it will incentivize farmers to produce more beef, which is exactly, how it should be. So there's no shortage of it. They're just, prices are a bit higher. The other thing that I would say that I found personally is I probably halved my expenditure on food since going carnivore because I don't eat crap anymore. I don't buy fizzy drinks. I don't buy ice creams. I don't buy chocolate. I don't buy biscuits. I don't eat cake. I don't eat all of that crap that's that is super duper expensive. And I just eat once a day, maybe twice a day, and it's basically meat, eggs, and a bit of dairy. So the myth is that, oh, I couldn't afford to do carnivore because it's too expensive. Well, it will only be expensive if you buy meat and all the other crap that you. But that's the whole point. You don't buy the rubbish. You don't buy the peasant carbs anymore that are no good for you.
Yeah. So how do your family and friends feel about this?
Interesting. There's been a slow movement. I've got a 21-year-old son, and he's most programmed um, into, like, he still believes in calories in, calories out. Try to explain to him about that. But the thing that keeps on smacking him in the face is that he actually sees what it's been doing to me. And his explanation of it is, oh, well, you just eat fewer calories than you used to do. And I just like to say, no, I don't. The stuff that I actually eat is, yeah. And I've done YouTube videos on this myself. The whole idea of a calorie is bonkers. You get some food and you burn it and you measure how much water, how much temperature of some water goes up by. Your body doesn't process food like that. It's just ridiculous. My wife is a little bit,
Right.
she's more ahead of the curve in that she stopped eating bread, rice and pasta at home. She'll still eat some at lunchtime. And her issue is fruit, which I think is the kind of Finnish sugar addiction. Like she's fairly healthy, but what I see a lot around here is um, Finns who they look like they're eating in the month of September, 12 months a year. So they're just genetically, the berries are around here for a month a year in August, September. And obviously, for the people that have been living here, it was like hardwired into them, like to eat as much stuff, sugary stuff as possible, convert it into fat to get them through the winter. And what I see here is that you see some people who are clearly they don't cope well with carbohydrates and sugar, and they some of them are absolutely huge, and I feel sorry for them. And I remember sat on an airplane going back from Greece earlier this spring, sat next to this Finnish guy, and basically he was just chowing down on Pringles or whatever, just non-stop the whole flight. And that's his. That's in some ways you can say, well, that's not his fault. I know it kind of is, but it's just hardwired into him genetically, and his only way out of that is to not eat peasant carbs and just eat animal protein and animal fat. But then I don't know about you, Dave. I find it. I've never got to the stage yet where I've stopped somebody on the street and said, like, "Would you want some help?" Or because it's
I've wanted to, but I can't bring
Yeah,
myself to do it because I know
no,
if it was me that I'd just be like, What are you attacking me? What?"
yeah, exactly, exactly, exactly. Um, but I think there's a guy that's on my street, and I think the last time I spoke to you, he's a big guy, and he walks every single evening, and he's out for like 2 hours. And since I've last spoke to you, he's certainly not lost any weight, even though he's been doing these 2 hour walks. So I just wonder what he's probably chugging down soft drinks or loads of, bread, potatoes, rice, all the stuff that the Finnish health authorities say is healthy.
Right. I can just imagine, it's a year since we spoke, right? So I can just imagine in that year and before that when you saw him, I'm sure he's going to his doctor and his doctor's just saying eat less and move more.
Yeah, that's it.
And
Yeah,
and he's thinking to himself, well, I'm following the instructions. It's going to work out for me one day. And
yeah.
that's
It's just
that's what frustrates me the most about this.
it's very sad, Dave. This bloke clearly cares about his health. Otherwise, he wouldn't be just walking for 2 hours every day. But this bloke's huge. He must be like 150 kg. Um, so what's going on there? It's not working, but he'll be given that same advice again, and then it will be, well, it leads to mental health problems. I think in that people just think, well, it's my fault. I can't control my appetite, or which is kind of partially true, but it's only because of the food that they've been told that's healthy that they're eating. And I noticed this
It's
again
a
when I'm in the supermarket. The fat people are always the ones that have the low fat stuff and loads of
right.
peasant carbs.
Right.
I was in,
But
I was in,
it's an awesome business model, right?
yes,
It's a fantastic business model. You sell something that's addictive, it
yeah,
causes all these health problems,
yeah,
and you get to blame the customer for it. It's
yeah.
fantastic.
But that's just a conspiracy theory.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. When I was, this is a thing, Dave. I'm sure people watching this interview they'll know about anecdotes. Like I was in Greece on holiday, and there was a bunch of Finns in the hotel, and there was this one large lady, and when she went for breakfast, there was all this kind of relatively healthy local food. Like there was loads of eggs, various types of bacon and sausage and stuff like that. So that's what I was eating. Um, she felt the need to bring these Finnish rye crisps with her, with like some heart logo on the front of it. And then, those were plonked on her table. And then the other thing that she was eating, I noticed, was that, the Greek breakfast, they also had like cakes and biscuits. So, me being like nosy, like, of course, what was she eating? She was eating basically the cakes and the biscuits because she was in September. She's in September 12 months a year, and she just craves that sugary stuff, and the carbs, and she'll die. She'll die decades before her time, and it's awful.
The way you look at it, do you think we're heading into the abyss and there's no stopping this, or do you think there's some hope?
Good question, Dave. Um, I think there's already a polarization, a binary split, and it's not 50-50 by any means. But it might only be 5% of us at the moment that have woken up to this. Obviously, we had the kind of the biological fascism that I think maybe 30% of us saw through that. But I think the carnivore low carb is similar. What I've noticed is that I've never met somebody who's low carb or keto or carnivore who had it. I would say about 5% of people have discovered it, maybe more, 5 to 10%. They've had unbelievable, life changing, positive results as a result of it. Um, They're also active on social media, and what I see is big face-offs between the kind of the repeater station normies who just parrot whatever the TV says and whatever the Finnish health authorities say, and they get angry when people explain to them that insulin is a fat storage hormone, and maybe it might be a bad idea to do as the NHS recommends, that diabetics should eat bananas and bread in moderation. You know, for people that have a problem metabolizing carbohydrates, for them to be suggesting that they should be eating bananas and bread, it's criminal. So I think there's an information war going on at the moment, I think, because I think many of the carnivores and low carb, they're actually quite vociferous, that they're quite loud because they've had such life-changing positive results. But then on the other hand, you've also got the people who trust the science, comrade, and you know what they're into is like what I call the techno fix, which is, oh, your body is kind of like flawed, stupid old liver producing cholesterol. You know, like, why does the body produce cholesterol? What does the body use cholesterol for? Like, most normies don't know that, you know? But once you find out, then it's like, okay, so testosterone, that's made from um, cholesterol. Vitamin D, which is really a hormone. Um, oh, it plays a vital role in the immune system. Um, oh, your brain is made of cholesterol. Most of the cholesterol in your body is actually produced in your liver. Only a fraction of it is ingested. These are facts. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are facts. But normies, they're not exposed to that, and they don't want to know. And I just see a split. And what's going to happen is the normies, they're going to be on their statins, they're going to be on their diabetes meds, and best of luck with that. Fat and miserable, and die in their 60s and 70s, best case scenario, from heart disease. Whereas the people that kind of work it out for themselves by, like, as I say, for me, I was annoyed with myself that I'd forgotten stuff from A-level biology, that carbohydrates are broken down into sugars in the body. So there's no real difference apart from, I don't know, an hour or something between a slice of bread and a piece of chocolate. Am I optimistic about the future? I'm optimistic for people who are critical thinkers, who are logical. I'm not optimistic for the kind of the normie sheep. Well, they're going to have they're just going off down the road. It's they've chosen to do it. So same as that one, they chose that one as well.
Mm. So, when you talk about the people that are not really critical thinkers,
Yeah,
through all the jobs I've had in my life, there's always been a percentage of people that work in the companies that don't really utilize critical thinking.
yeah,
And I kind of just always assumed that they were just trying to get along, just trying to get through the day and that kind of thing.
yeah.
But then with my introduction to the carnivore community over the last 3 years, and then looking at the normies, um, and I started to think, well, maybe critical thinking is not something that everyone does well,
Definitely.
because there's so many people not thinking critically about stuff, and like, and professionals, doctors and researchers that
Yeah,
won't believe the results that are staring them in the face because they don't have a study that says this will happen.
Dave, I've got an interesting one on that. A while back, it was in the Daily Mail, I think. There was some sort of worrying story about anti-vaxxers in the NHS, and they talked about various NHS trusts, and it was in Highbury and Islington NHS Trust, I think. Um, Over 90% of them hadn't had the latest winter, one of those. So only 10% had it. So that tells me that I think many of these doctors and nurses, they do know, because they, same as the GPs and statins, they've been prescribing these things for decades. Surely they must see what statins actually do to their patients. Now, they know what these do to their patients, and they're dodging them. 90% dodged it in that one trust. I also believe, well, I don't, I believe, I don't have any evidence to this effect, but I'd be very surprised if there's so many GPs that have statins. And what I would say to somebody who goes to their GP and they're told by the computer, give this person a blood test, and then they're told by the computer, give them statins, recommend them take statins. What I would say to those people is, ask your GP, are you on statins? Do you take statins? Because my guess is that most of those, insert your swear word of choice, most of those, let's call them people, are not on statins. They will know. They will know. And the other thing as well that I would say, Dave, is, um, on like the consensus hugger thing, I think there's many people, what I notice is that they do this thing called appeals to authority. So it's like, you'll ask them about something and they'll go, "Oh well, I'm not an expert, but I just trust I'll just trust what somebody like what the government says." Oh, you think you know more than Chris Whitty, the senior health advisor? Oh, I'm just going to trust the science. And they and then that's again where they can come in with their mockery and, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. Their only defense is to say, oh, look, somebody above me has said that XYZ is a good thing. Therefore, XYZ must be a good thing. And screw trying to do any induction and logical reasoning yourself. Screw reality. I'll just trust the science, comrade. And I think there's many people like that. They're just blind consensus huggers. Whatever somebody above them, whatever the popular thing is, they'll just go along with it. Like I found that with Brexit as well. All clever people support staying in the EU, but then you'd ask them questions and they'd be clueless about it. And their only defence was like an appeal to authority. Oh, so many people in university, the professors, they say that Brexit is like, racist or something. And that's their only logic. Well, it's not an argument. It's just blind repetition.
Yeah. Sadly, I think this is kind of a human trait that a lot of people fall into
Yeah,
because, yeah, I mean, that's the same in workplaces everywhere. It's like you've got the people who are critically thinking, and they're always fighting with the people who are saying, "Yeah, but we can't change the process, even if your way is better,
yeah,
because the manager told us to do it this way."
yeah.
And it's like,
We've got to follow all of those clever people who say they're running off the cliff. But many of them aren't even running off the cliff. They're just saying that they ran off the cliff. If you think about Davos and the World Economic Forum and stuff, they're not eating um, shortbreads and chocolate hobnobs and whatever. They're eating salmon, wild salmon, and was it wacko? Wait, was it beef? That Japanese beef? What's it called? Wacko.
a wagyu.
Wagyu. That's it. That's the one. But yeah,
They're probably not eating Impossible burgers, are they?
yeah. It's just I don't know.
Um, so, like, if someone like, let's say that guy that you see walking the 2 hours every day, let's
Yeah,
say he he said to you, "Look, I've seen you've lost a lot of weight over the last couple of years.
yeah,
Tell me what you're doing.
yeah,
I wanna do it."
yeah.
What advice or tips would you give him?
Well, there's a couple of younger guys that I know who I've actually forwarded on some videos, from people like yourself and Chafee and the others. But if I was to explain it to them in words, um, I suppose there's two things. The first one is the mechanics. So I guess the most important thing is the what insulin is, because most people have got no idea. It's like a fat storage hormone. So if you're eating carbohydrates and sugars, it's impossible to lose weight because your body will be secreting this fat storage hormone. So you have to, and then also the thing that I would say to them is, particularly if they're a Finn, like Finns have only been growing grains for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 centuries. What were Finns eating before that? They weren't digging up avocados in the snow or pulling bananas off pine trees, or they were eating animal protein and animal fat. And that's what Finns are adapted to eating. It's food that's rich in cholesterol, incidentally. I can say this because I'm a Brit living here, but they're pretty smart people here, pretty smart people, and I think that was a legacy of their diet. But what's happened, particularly since the 70s, was that they can be very, very trusting, can the Finns, and they just swallowed all the BS, the low fat, the toxic margarine rather than butter, and they just love sweet stuff because again of just
Right.
where they live. And it might have been different if oranges grew on trees in Finland and there was you know
Mm.
lots of fruit around, but there wasn't. There was only berries around for like, I don't know, a month tops.
Yeah, and I've seen how deep the snow can get there. There's nothing growing in that.
No, exactly. So what were they eating? Animals. That's it. And, but to get through it, they needed to pile on the fat in the autumn.
Yeah, Ansel Keys did a lot of damage. It wasn't just the US, that his thing, all governments around the world followed suit, right?
Yeah. But as I say, what's interesting, Dave, is that in newspaper comments, the local newspaper, um, they have an ability for people to write comments underneath articles, and they even have a column that's composed entirely of people's text messages. And you can see there's more and more people who've discovered carnivore and low carb, and they're calling out BS. They're saying stuff like, well, in 1970, we were fit and healthy. You see photographs of Finns, they're all like, you know, 2 meter tall, skinny, blonde people. And now you see some of them, not all of them. There's some of them seem to be able to cope with peasant carbs better than others, but some of them they just can't cope with it, and they just balloon. And it's always that central obesity, like the huge stomachs and backsides. And it's sad. It before it kills them, it must destroy any joy that they get.
Yeah, just when you mentioned the time period there, it makes me think of Carry On movies. Do you like Carry On movies?
Yeah, I remember them, Dave.
Steve James and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So you look at all the cast of the Carry On movies, right? Hattie Jakes, that really big lady,
yeah,
Hattie Jakes was the outlier
yeah,
back in those days.
yeah,
If they made Carry On now, like the Charles Hawtrey would be the outlier,
yeah,
the skinny guy.
yeah,
Like he'd be the outlier. Everyone else would look like Hattie Jakes.
yeah. No, that's right. That's right.
Or Hattie Jakes would be a bikini model these days.
No, it's I don't know. It's just so sad, really. And obviously, it's going to health spending on healthcare. Finnish healthcare's they're spending more and more money on it every single year. But as I say, there is a movement away. I don't. I think we're actually winning this information war. It's just the speed at which it's happening, whether it's fast enough.
We just got to hope that we're not drowned in muddying the waters information in the meantime.
Yeah, and well, this is where I think your channel is superb because it, it, if we start, I think to the people that are watching this channel now, what I urge you to do is please share all of Dave's video testimonies with the thousands of people he's had on his channel. Send it out via email, and uh, uh, that's how we win it. Really, that's how we win it.
this kind of knowledge sharing is really only possible in the last few years,
Yeah,
now that everyone has social media accounts and everyone's got access to email and everyone's, and it's in your pocket all day, you know?
yeah. No,
Mm.
that's right. That's right. Um,
Yes. So on social media, like, how can people get a hold of you? You mentioned your YouTube channel?
yeah, my YouTube channel, you can find me easily. It's just my name. So if you were to type into the search bar Nigel, Nigel, Watson, Watson, you'll find me. And I do videos about carnivore and economics and Christianity, and because I think that's, again, for me, I found carnivore ultimately through prayer. That's what I believe. Um, there's actually one other thing I wanted to say, Dave, actually, which is about, about fasting. In my experience, fasting is only possible once you've ditched the carbs and the sugars. For me, I tried to do it prior to that, but I was just I was still a sugar burner, and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even sleep at night. I was so hungry. Whereas now, it's 3:15 in Finland now. And I've not had anything to eat, and I'm not hungry at all. So, I can easily go, 20 hours. I've done 36-hour fasts. And I think that's good for you as well, actually. It gives your body a bit of a break. And also, I used to be very, played football and cricket. I'm very glad that I discovered this way of eating when I did. But I wish I'd have discovered it sooner on in my life, because I think it would have been a game changer athletically. Because you don't hit that kind of brick wall after an hour, or where you kind of feel that type of sugar deprived hunger where you feel just sick and ill. Well, you just don't get that once you've ditched the carbohydrates and sugars. So that's,
And it's an amazing feeling, right? Because if
yeah,
you've ever been more than 2 hours on a regular diet
yeah,
and you've got that feeling, like, almost hypoglycemic feeling,
yeah,
like, "Get me some food now,"
yeah,
and then to be able to eat in a way where you don't think about food and you can just stop eating and then look at your watch and go, "Well, it's 12 hours since I ate," or, "I've been
yeah,
awake for
more,
12
yeah,
hours and I haven't
yeah,
eaten yet," or something like
yeah.
that. It's crazy.
It is, Dave, it is crazy compared to normie world, but actually this is the way that our bodies are designed to run. We're not supposed to be eating three meals a day. The other thing I was going to say
You
as well is that I really, really, really enjoy food. I love what I eat. Whereas before it was just about cramming down the next cheese sandwich, to get me, to get the blood sugar back up again. I don't have any of that, and if I was to that, I know I've changed my health, transformed it for the better, but it's that I suppose you call it a roller coaster, and it's a good description, but it's a blinking painful roller coaster. It's a barbaric roller coaster. I'm just off that now, and I'm never going back on it. And that's
mm.
when I see. I think we talked about this before you started recording the interview. But that's when I see cakes and biscuits and crisps. I see that roller coaster, and I see it. I see it as poison. These are the peasant foods that they want us to eat, that are going to mean that they don't have to pay our pensions for so long, and they're going to be ching ching quids in, for the pharmaceutical drugs, because we're going to need them if we're eating their recommended diet.
It's the edible version of handcuffs.
Yeah. You often ask your guests what advice you'd give to somebody who wants to start carnivore. And I hear some people say, oh, ease yourself into it. And I would definitely, definitely, definitely advise against that, particularly if you're a carb or a sugar addict and you've got weight problems. You've just got to go cold turkey. You've got to just drop all of it. And but the good news is eat as much meat and even dairy, eggs in that initial period as you want. Don't go hungry. Just eat as much meat and dairy, but no rice, no, not even a little bit. No bread, no pasta, no cakes, not even a little biscuit. This kind of myth of what do they call it? Everything in moderation, because I think that's a powerful myth that they've fed. If you have any of those things, it will just wreck it, and you'll end up putting on weight. So my very very strong advice to anybody who's watching this who wants to try it is, if you go for it, you've got to completely ditch the carbohydrates, completely ditch them, because otherwise it won't work. And then the other thing that I would say is, it, you probably, if you were like me, you probably will feel pretty rough for a week and a half, 2 weeks. But if you can get through that, then that's where, and so maybe just commit to doing it for a month, but go all in. So I completely reject this advice of moderation, ease yourself into it. Because if you do that, you're just setting people up to fail again. That's my belief.
You just gotta kinda treat it like a drug addiction.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Mm.
And that's what it
Yeah.
is, Dave. That's what it is.
Yeah, that I mean, that's because of the way I am with stuff, like, I get addicted very easily. That's the way I had to get off it.
Yeah,
Just cold turkey.
me
Rip the
too.
Band-Aid off.
Me too. Because for me personally, I think the carbs and the sugar are way more addictive than alcohol. Way more addictive.
Yeah, I feel like actually, the carbs are more likely to drive the alcohol addiction than the other way
Yeah,
around.
yeah,
Nigel, I'll link to your channel in the show notes.
yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. I really appreciate your time.
And thank you, Dave, for everything that you do, and you're doing God's work. And I just hope, with the help of your viewers, your channel continues to grow, and we can get new people acquainted with the idea of ditching the carbohydrates and eating a proper human diet. So thanks again, Dave, for everything that you do. Dave, one last thing, if I may.
Sure. Oh, sure.
Yeah, yeah, because you often
Is
ask.
that is that a sausage?
No, it's a knife. Yeah, left down.